Today we bring the church here to a close with a feast of Christ the King, or as some refer to it, the reign of Christ. And there's bits of that I prefer. This is a Sunday when we celebrate Christ risen on his throne, and you see in so many paintings, and on church domes, especially in the Eastern Orthodox world. Some of you who were in Greece may have seen that earlier this year. This is a day that focuses, in many respects, on the transcendent images of Jesus that we hear in the Nicene Creed that we'll say at the end of this sermon. This passage also highlights, though, the misunderstanding of kingship between the Roman world, the Jewish world, and the kingdom that Jesus is bringing to our world. This also illustrates the great difference between the image of Jesus as portrayed in the Gospel of Mark and in today's Gospel of John. I mentioned last week that Mark was written somewhere around 70 CE. The temple had been destroyed, the 5-year revolt of the Jews had ended in the total destruction of Jerusalem and the near annihilation of the Jewish population in that part of the world and the scattering of them to all various parts of the globe. It seemed that their world was ending, and Mark's gospel reflects this in that little apocalypse and some of those readings like we heard in Revelation both last week and this. But the image of Jesus that we've been hearing in Mark all through this liturgical year is one of the preacher, the teacher, and more than in any other gospel, the healer. This is an immanent Jesus, one who is down here in the trenches with us in our daily lives. This is the Jesus that is filled with compassion and love. John's gospel is written at least 30 years later, late 90s, early 100s, by a community, possibly in Ephesus, that has been expelled from the synagogues following the Council of Jamnia, where the rabbis decreed that any Jew who declared that Jesus was the Messiah was a heretic and was banned from the synagogues. The world had not ended, as many in Mark's community believed. What happened? And now we have a new church. It is becoming its own faith. However, there's great bitterness focused on the Jews in this gospel. For a modern analogy, think in terms of the embattled Palestinian Christians' relationship with the modern state of Israel. That's the level of the hard feelings that we see in John. And unfortunately, that portrayal of the Jews, if you will, has been used for an awful lot of anti-Semitic behavior. And that is a problem we see to this day. But that's not where I want to go today. Focusing on the transcendent Christ does not give us a complete picture any more than focusing on the immanent Christ. It's not a case of one or the other, but both and. The view of the transcendent Jesus we get in John makes sense given his community and the situation in which his gospel was written. When you are in the position of God's community, you really want and need a powerful, transcendent Savior, one who will lead you into the kingdom that Jesus proclaimed throughout his time on earth. I firmly believe that we in the Episcopal Church and our parish welcome a diversity of views, and that offers a unique unity, because in diversity we all come to the table no matter what our image of Jesus and God is. We all agree that Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. That is our core value. But there's room at the table for all of the images of Christ. In fact, there is a place reserved at the table for each and every one of those images. For the simple reason that each of us develops an image of Jesus that we need at a particular time in our life. And it's important to remember that that image is not stagnant. There is no one image of God or Jesus that is going to last you for your entire life. In reality, if your image of God and Jesus never changes, you may want to examine that. Because most theologians will say something along the same line. Just when I think I have my image of God right, God blows it up and I have to start all over again. The same is true for our image of Jesus. And it's one of the beauties of how God and Christ speak to us. The image you have right now is exactly the image that you need, even if that image makes you a little uncomfortable. Now, all of this speculation about images of Jesus is important, but as I worked on learning this gospel this week, I found myself drawn to the middle portion. My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being turned over. And it is my kingdom is not of this world. And in all the commentaries and all the ink I read spent about this week, none of them talked about the kingdom. And that struck me as kind of unusual. What does Jesus mean that his kingdom is not of this world? Herod certainly doesn't understand, because Herod is of this world. The world one where we are all separate, all fighting for our little piece of whatever is important to our ego-driven selves. What Richard Rohr refers to as our false self, our ego self. Jesus proclaims a kingdom of love and mutual support, one where we are all united rather than separate. And I was having trouble wrestling with this, how to put this. And then Richard Rohr dropped a gem in my lap on Friday morning's meditation, and I see a couple of you nodding your heads because you all read it. The risen Christ represents the final and full state of every true self. God in you, who is able to see and honor God everywhere beyond him. God in you, able to see and honor God everywhere beyond him. In other words, Christ is more than anything else a holon, a scientific term for something that is simultaneously a whole by itself, and yet a part of a larger whole too. Jesus is telling us that we are all holons. We all participate in the one single life of God. The word that came into my mind is not one from Christianity, but it's namaste. How many people know, anybody know what namaste means? It's a lot of people, it's a very fashionable greeting. I remember having a massage on a cruise ship, and the girl goes, namaste, and I said, do you know what that means? And she looked at me like, no. You are saying that the sacred in me sees the sacred in you. And she went, that's really cool. But that's what Richard's talking about. And it's an idea that transcends any one world religion, because it's there in all of them. This image of the kingdom is radically different from the world that Pilate, Herod, the Romans, the Jews, and the disciples lived in. To be honest, I think that's the problem we see in Mark, where the disciples frequently do not understand what Jesus is talking about in the kingdom. Jesus' kingdom is a kingdom of love and connection. If we are all connected, we cannot hate the other without hating ourselves. It's sort of the reverse, but the same thing of love ourselves, therefore we love the world. Sounding familiar? Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. I can almost hear Michael Curry's voice in the back. Well, it's not a quiet voice. Michael Curry's voice is never quiet. But I remember him standing up at one of the Eucharists at General Convention going, if it isn't about love, it isn't about Jesus. And boy, he's absolutely right on that. The kingdom of Jesus, the Jesus that is a kingdom of, is a kingdom of love. The kingdom is a world where we wouldn't have to go down to Sacred Heart Catholic Church and make breakfast at 6 o'clock in the morning to feed people our world has forgotten. This is a kingdom, is a world where every person is important and valued as a beloved child of God, no exceptions. You see, I believe that Christ the King is best described in the hymn. That my image, even on this day of Christ the King, is that Christ is the King of love. So let us now take a moment, stand, open our hymnals to page 645, and to sing the first chorus of the King of Love, my shepherd is.